Blue lights and sirens, yeah, it's time to go. No time to defund us. You should know that we're not perfect. We're human, we're flawed. Just say to some grace for the sake of us all.
Hello, Vax Choice and Clout Hub community. Thank you so much for joining us today for an episode of In the Lion's Den, hosted by Dr. Bill Lionberger. How are you doing today, Dr. Bill?
I'm doing great, Melissa. We're here for an incredibly important show, basically Toxic Skies Part 2, and it's going to be a great show.
Yes, it is. We've got a new guest on today. Her name is Kathryn Saari. She's a mother, a homemaker, and a researcher. She is a citizen journalist who has been tracking the revolving doors between industry and regulatory agencies for years. I follow the money, identifying the conflicts of interest of prominent NGOs, billionaires, and government agencies. She certainly does the hard work for some of us who just like to see the facts and the evidence rather than have to go dig it out ourselves. So I'm excited to see what she's got today.
Excellent. Well, I can't wait to get to it.
I will be in the background enjoying the show, and I'll be back later for questions.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to In the Lion's Den today for Toxic Skies Part 2, Unmasking the Hidden Threat. We've got an amazing guest today, and let's get right to it. Why have the skies above us shifted from the familiar blue expanses we once knew and grew up with to unsettling streaks of haze obscuring the life-giving sun? What you perceive isn't a mere change in weather. It's a direct and deliberate threat to both humanity and the natural world, a global operation unfolding in secret and in plain sight. Today, we are ripping back the curtain on a global conspiracy that is poisoning our planet from above. Each day, we go about our lives, a shadowy network conducts clandestine operations right above our heads, altering our weather and threatening our existence. These operations thrive in secrecy, rarely acknowledged openly, yet their destructive influence is unmistakable. Etched into the fabric of extreme weather events that shatter records and cause natural disasters and can no longer be passed off as a rare weather anomaly. Once-in-a-lifetime hailstorms now batter us with alarming frequency and ferocity, their intensifying wrath a testament to the climate engineering programs at work. Have you ever wondered about the strange clouds that started as streaks across the sky, or questioned the toxins that down upon us? The true insidiousness lies deep in the sinister agenda of the secretive keepers behind these operations. Billions of toxic and tons of toxic chemicals are being released globally, decimating ecosystems, igniting unprecedented firestorms, and crippling our ability to feed ourselves. This bio and eco-terrorism executed on a breathtaking and terrifying scale. Who dares control our skies, and at such an ecosystem and human catastrophic cost? What dreadful fate awaits us if this deliberate planet-wide poisoning continues? The clock is ticking, and the time is running out. And how do we dismantle these covert ecocidal operations before they cause further destruction and irreversible harm? And with that, I would like to bring on our special guest today, Kathryn Saari. Hello, Kathryn. How are you?
Excellent. Thanks so much for having me today. I was noticing I wore the wrong shirt because I have a shirt that says "Awaken the Lions," and I wore it on a different interview, so I'm changing it up a little bit. But thanks for having me. And just watching the intro and hearing the music, it really brings the weight of what we're up against right back to me. It just floods right back. The things I've learned over the last 10 years, this has been happening for decades and decades. And I started my research, my discovery when I first had my son, close to now 12 years ago. And prior to that, had never really paid attention. I was living sort of a superficial lifestyle. I was traveling around the world as a corporate jet flight attendant, former training to be a journalist when I went to college many years ago, got my massage license. It's just a jill of many trades. But it was after having my son that I started to open my eyes to the world around me, and it's bringing life into the world. And I've never looked back. I've learned so many things, and it's like layer after layer continues to fall off.
Well, we've been looking to do a series on the poisoning of our skies for some time. This is the second in the series. We had a great first show. Your video caught my eye in an incredible way, because your ability to be a detective and actually extract information and really show the other side for who they are was quite amazing, and one of the most telling that I've ever seen on the subject. And we're going to play some of that clip today, but before we do, if you could give us a brief synopsis of what brought you there and what we're about to see.
Yes, well, I could go on for hours. I've told this story before, but as I started to look into what was happening over my own head, I began, I was documenting the sky. I was taking pictures from morning through evening, watching the grid patterns expand and spread and take away our sun. And I was starting a garden a few years ago. I decided I'm going to start a garden to make sure my food is clean. I want to buy hyper local from local farmers. I've come to understand that the system is designed to keep us sick and dependent. And so as I was building my garden, I was reminded that I could leave the cities behind, leave the 5G, leave the political stuff behind. I have a 5-acre property. I was ready to start growing my own food and raising my own chickens and experimenting with animals. And as I was building my garden, I realized that no matter where I fled to, you can't control what's happening over your head. And this is happening globally. There are reports coming out everywhere. And I'm blown away to see the awareness, the momentum and the awareness, the awakening is really kind of reaching a fever pitch, I'm feeling. And there will be no suppression of the truth. I think it's all coming out. But so I discovered after doing a lot of research that there was an ongoing cloud seeding operation happening over my county. Now, cloud seeding is different than the solar radiation management global dimming that you see much higher in the atmosphere. But regardless, this was a concrete contract that I discovered that had been going on for decades based on an outdated environmental impact report. I live near Yosemite, so this is a sort of a protected, beautiful area, lots of wildlife, lots of nature out here. And as I started researching and exploring I started testing my rain samples as well. So as I started doing the research, I decided I was inspired by Dane Wigington. He had tested rain samples, they tested water samples. And I was curious to find out, well, what's falling in my rain here? Because this is where I'm going to be growing my food. This is where my child is going to be growing up. And what I found was alarming. I found in my rain samples aluminum, there was some barium, strontium, zinc, copper, titanium, which was strange, magnesium, vanadium. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it was years of me trying to figure out, well, what are the safe limits for these metals? And what if you're inhaling it, is that different than ingesting it? And no matter what, it's coming down from our atmosphere and it's going to end up in our water. We're breathing it in. And that led to a journey of me trying to engage with the California Air and Resources Board. I found that they don't test for a majority of the metals that I found in my samples. I was very disappointed to find that, of course, not surprised though, that our regulatory agencies are failing us. They're not actually looking at these emissions. They don't test for these things because they're unaware of an emission of concern. So I've been trying to bring it to their attention that yes, these are emissions of concern. And in my research, I discovered that the cloud seeding flares are loaded with aluminum and zinc, which act as propellants to disperse the silver iodide. And so that this is part of my journey. And so I there was a period where I was working with a group, not working, but collaborating with a group, and I was told that they would get some attorneys looking over my documents as I started to do Public Records Act requests. I had flight logs, I had receipts, I had, information on ejectables and burn-in-place flares. A lot of the ingredients also are proprietary. So there is no transparency here for the public. My local county supervisors were unaware that this had been happening. So I've been trying to sound the alarm on the signals that I have found in my 20+ rain samples, and what I'm finding with the MSDS sheets that I've received from the company. Nobody knows what's in this particular cloud seeding operation, and I need help from an attorney who's willing to do this because they care. And I'm ready to ask them to cease and desist until they update their environmental impact report. It's time for some transparency. So that aside, what you're going to play here is a clip. I became aware of the aircraft that was doing it. The company that was doing it was called Weather Modification International, also known as, Weather Modification LLC or Inc. They are based out of North Dakota. Every year they come out between November and April, and they park some planes on a tarmac in Modesto Airport, which is about an hour from my house. And, they'll go out and they'll do these like figure 8 loops over certain areas. And it happens to be right over my head. I can hear the aircraft. Now they're flying a Beechcraft, like a C-90, and they have ejectable flares and burn-in-place flares. And I have been trying to contact Weather Modification, WMI, I'll call them, for a very long time. They refuse to answer the phone. I got in touch with the Ice Crystals Engineering company that makes the flares. They refuse to talk to me. They don't give out any information to the public. So, and I've been stonewalled for ages from the regulatory agencies, the Air Pollution Control District, and I don't like being ignored. So this growing frustration that I wasn't getting the answers I was seeking. Nothing was being done. And this was the second time in one evening that I heard this particular aircraft over my head, and I just hit my limit. So it was around 10 o'clock in the evening that I heard him for round 2. And I contacted a friend and said, it's time to go to the airport. And so we went to the airport and heard him for round 2. And I contacted a friend and said, it's time to go to the airport. And so we went to the airport, and it was in the middle of the night, just like around 1:30 in the morning. By the time the plane landed, and it's a small airport, so a private fixed base operation for them to come and go, the Monterey Jet Center. And I found my way inside. And when I get inside, I didn't know exactly what I would say. I just spoke from the heart. And you're going to hear a little bit of that conversation. I was able to confront the pilot who had been flying directly over my house.
That's a great intro. I'm looking forward to hearing that. Your story reminds me of, the pandemic, right? Where the so-called agencies that are supposed to protect us are the very agencies that not only turn a deaf ear, but it's like they are engineered to turn a deaf ear and not listen to the humans that they work for. And these folks, I would come back to the money. I mean, I'd also want to look back and say, well, who's paying these people? Where's that coming from? They say follow the money. But anyway, Melissa, if you could go ahead and.
Modesto Jet Center. Okay.
Hi. Yes. Great. Thank you.
Good. What can I do
Good
for
to see you. I'm here. You're Tim, right?
No,
Oh no.
no. I don't know a Tim.
Jody?
No, don't know. Well, I know a Jody.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jody Fisher?
No, yeah, I know Jody Fisher.
You do? Okay, good.
Yeah.
And then who are you?
I'm one of the other captains.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So come on outside. Or not. Or just whatever. Are you free? No?
No, I gotta reflare.
Okay, so
stuff, but
I have paperwork for you that I want to give to you. So
Okay.
hang tight, I'll go get it. But then we've been trying to reach Jody and you for a long time.
okay.
And we are tired of you dumping heavy metals all over our county.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not the one to talk to about that.
No, but you are, but you're the one that's doing it. So I've been taking rain samples. I have over 20 samples. And every time you fly, we get high amounts of aluminum, barium, strontium, titanium, magnesium. So I want to know, are you aware of what you're doing? I know you think it's like to increase water supply for Turlock and Modesto, but it's not really happening.
Yeah, you can talk to them
I've tried.
about that.
I've
so-
called them and they're not calling me back. So we're now getting really involved, and now we're gonna bring something legal against your company.
Okay, well, you can talk to them about that for
I
sure.
know, but
so.
I want you to know though, like, we are real people underneath what you're doing. You spray right over our houses. We hear you, we know you, we see you, we're watching your planes and your patterns, okay?
Yeah,
It's twice
I get
today
that.
now. You did 2 flights, 2
Yeah,
3-hour flights.
It's public knowledge, yeah.
Well, it's not really though. That's the problem. So you have not properly notified our board of supervisors about this. Hi, are you the other pilot?
Yes.
Hi, what's your name?
Khaled.
Khaled?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's
hi.
not-
Hi.
It's not we have people at home base that you can talk to about that stuff.
But
so-
they've not called back. So now we're getting to the point where we're getting our supervisors involved. So the supervisors of our county needs to be notified. They've not been notified. You've been doing this for 30 years. I know it's a long time. You guys are like, it's cool, it's easy. We're talking about all of the metals and the flares that you're using. So aluminum and zinc propel the silver iodide. You're spraying right over us all the time. And our plant life is suffering. They are now selling aluminum, genetically modified seeds to grow food because our soil is so contaminated. Okay, so what you're spraying is not good for the environment, and it's not good for the people because there's an early onset dementia, there's Alzheimer's, things are starting to happen to people's health. And I really do believe there's a linkage to what we're breathing in the environment every day. When you guys spray us in November through April, it's your yearly contract, I'm aware of that too. So I just wanted to meet the pilots and say, you know, where's Jody? I've called Jody, I've talked, I think Leslie was the other one, Leslie Fisher? No, it's another Fisher.
Yeah,
Lisa?
probably his wife.
Okay,
But,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's their responsibility, that's not our
I
responsibility.
understand, yeah. But the money that you're receiving to do this is coming from, is it taxpayers that are paying for this?
That's not my department.
I want you to be aware, do you have family?
Yeah, I have family.
I have family too, I have
Yeah.
children. So we're outside and we hear your plane over us all the time. So that's what he sounds like over my area. The cloud seeder. He's out there now peppering us with heavy metals. I just got home and he's been out there for 2 hours, 45 minutes, maybe 3 hours. So right now, it's safe to say you are breathing in heavy metals. 904 DK. That's who that is. Weather Modification International. And I've been tracking this for a long time, and we have tried to get the supervisors involved, and they're clueless. They were not informed. According to the California codes and law, they should have notified our supervisors because you're doing this to benefit TID, okay? Mm-hmm. But it's not. It's happening over, well, it might be, but it's happening over our area, okay? Sonora, Groveland, Coulterville. You're doing your little figure eight loops. My 20 rain samples will show you that on the days that you're spraying or releasing your flares, we have copious amounts of aluminum, magnesium. There's been some barium, strontium, but titanium's weird. Is titanium also in your flares? Okay, that's unique for me. So I want you to know that there are health impacts and impacts to the soil and the plant life and all of those things. And when you do this, my whole community is watching. We don't know what to do.
Yeah, I understand your opinion.
It's not an opinion though.
So-
I will show you my samples. I'd love to.
I don't want to see your samples.
Why
you
is
can,
that?
You can take those to my
But you're
company.
flying the plane. But then how do I get in touch with Jody so he calls me back? I've left messages. We've tried reaching him multiple times. How do I get in touch with him?
Either call him again or.
Do you have a card I can use?
You stop. I don't have this card. No, you.
So I want you to know
you
I
stop
drove all
by
this
here.
way because I saw you flying for the second time tonight. So you flew twice tonight. I've listened to you now twice over my own house.
Mhm.
And it impacts all of us. And early onset dementia and Alzheimer's for
Yeah,
people in their
probably
30s
from-
and 40s.
Probably from all the food that people eat too.
That's
so.
true, but now I eat very clean and organic. So now if we're breathing in aluminum, you know, because aluminum and zinc, again, propel the silver iodide. It's not just silver iodide. It's the propellants within the flares. And then there's other chemicals within the flares that cause problems too. I want you just to think about that. Every time you go out there, you are contributing to the pollution of the environment. I know the goal
Did
is
you
to
drive
bring-
here today?
Yes, we did.
You're contributing to the pollution in the environment as
No,
well.
but I want you to know that.
No, there's
Yeah.
not. I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. You can take your concerns.
Are you the chief pilot?
To my, no, I'm not the chief pilot.
What is your name again?
It doesn't matter.
It does matter.
No, it doesn't.
I'd like to know.
No, it doesn't, because
It
you're
matters.
going to go try to smear that all over the place.
No, but I want to know, like,
No,
are you
that's
chief
none of your-
pilot?
It's none of your business.
It is my business because you're over my head dumping shit over our families
We're
and
not
our
doing
houses.
anything illegal, so.
It's not illegal yet. But now we haven't had air district hearing boards for years now, and people have not been paying attention, but people are starting to pay attention because they do care about their health and the health of our food and the health of our population. I want you to know that you, whether you know it or not or want to admit it or not, are contributing to dumping heavy metals on our soils and in our air. We're breathing it, we're drinking it, we're eating it.
Okay.
It matters to me.
Man.
Kathryn, what an incredible, I would say, you hijacked his day interview because he didn't wake up that day and decide, know that he was going to get hijacked and the truth was going
Right.
to come out. I mean, you set the bar high for anybody trying to investigate because you literally just continue to go to the information. My hat's off to that
Thank
work,
you.
but maybe you can follow up on that interview.
Yeah, it's funny, I haven't listened to it for a while. I get tired of hearing my own voice. And so but to be reminded again that he said, I don't want to see your samples. I don't even want to know, sort of like, I don't want to know. It's my job, but it's not really my job. Talk to somebody else about what I'm doing. And I was, when I went in there, part of me wonders, do they really know what they're doing? Are these like creepy, evil people? And I think they're doing their job and they've been hardened to what they're doing. It's sort of like in the slaughterhouse, you have people that horribly abuse animals and it's a part of what they do. It's their job. They grow accustomed to it and they get cold to it. They become apathetic. So my hope was to reach him person to person. I mean, to greet him in the middle of the night, to say that I knew the crew and to get into that building in the middle of the night in the dark. And he came in to figure out like who's here to see me. And I know when I left, I knew that he would not sleep well that night. I knew that every time he went up, he would think about the woman underneath his aircraft that he was listening. And so that was the impact I wanted to leave. I wanted to make sure he knew that I knew information. I had done my due diligence. I did my research. And I'm going to let you know because now he's on notice. He cannot plead ignorance. And I gave him an opportunity to look at my data and he refused. So that was that. It's really interesting to listen to it. It makes me sad because I think this is what a majority of pilots feel like. That's my impression. This is also not my first pilot confrontation. I had another one with a gentleman who was spraying toxic adulticides. That's the name they use. It's called adulticides. And it's under the guise of protecting us from mosquitoes. And actually, when I confronted this other pilot, he told me that this organophosphate pesticide was used as a nerve agent in World War I. And I don't doubt it was likely also used in World War II. But he said that he had the chemicals calibrated just so it was only to kill mosquitoes. But don't worry about the bees or the butterflies or the birds or your own health. We're just killing mosquitoes. It's baloney. They literally shut off that part of their brain. They accept their task and they do it. And it's time to start challenging them on what they're doing. Start to, letting them know we know. And if you don't know, here's a list of the active ingredients in what you're spraying. Here are my rain samples to show the metals that are in the flare or that I believe are linked to your flares. And now I want some answers.
When I view it, for a couple of times, but my impression is there's no question in my mind that he's 100% aware of what he's doing. And maybe choosing to not think about the implications because he's getting paid well to do the job. In the military and others, what I understand is they choose pilots very specifically with backgrounds that are conducive for this kind of work because they don't care, doesn't matter to them, they don't have a family, whatever the long list of choosing those pilots is for. So that they don't have to worry about maybe the whistleblowers and the insiders as much, even though we have lots of videos showing every part and piece of this, really.
Well, and also his accent later on, I had some people, I noticed it, that he said about. I think he's from Canada. And again, this company is based out of North Dakota. So he might come over from Canada and the crew flies the aircraft out and they probably are put up in a hotel for the duration of their season, and they get called to work, and they've got a meteorologist that they work with, and yeah, it's really atrocious. I'm really sick of it, and I'm really hoping that people now with this especially just understand that they know that they're spraying people, and I think they're pulling pilots that might be single or unattached. As you said, I mean, they have personality tests for pilots. I'm aware. I was a corporate jet flight attendant. There were some companies that would have personality tests to make sure that the PIC and the second in command could work well together. So, because there was crashes and stuff with miscommunication. So they know how to do personality tests for these men or women.
Yeah. Especially in the way that you've done, it's like opening Pandora's box. You can't close it back. Okay. It also, begins to highlight what's going on all around the country. And you mentioned multi-layers because, sometimes we pay attention to the lower flying planes, but they don't leave the chemtrails necessarily the same as the really large jets that are flying across our skies, dimming the sky and dropping huge payloads of these metals and black soot and other, maybe biological substances and who knows what. But
if I may speak,
good.
Exactly. I mean, they've done it before. And the population doesn't find out until decades and decades later. So it's not like they've never experimented on all of us before. Just look at 2020. That was a massive experiment, liability-free, injectable experimental products put into people's bodies. I'm of the opinion now, with all the research I've done, and I can touch on some of the things, I've connected a lot of dots. I've chosen, by the way, to pursue this cloud seeding operation because this is, firstly, nobody in my county was aware of it. They've completely broken protocol. I know they've broken laws. I know that we could go after them, and I'm waiting for someone to actually step up and help me. I feel like I've been strung along a little bit in that arena. But what I'll say is then you start connecting the dots with the bigger picture stuff. And I absolutely, with certainty, I feel that the military is involved, that these are covert operations. When I've read through documents that are written, by the National Academies Press, National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, they're sort of the globalist think tank for all sorts of things that are coming out in the world today. And they talk about the deployment of these sort of aircraft to do the global dimming, the solar radiation management, SRM, needing to be done in a way that was similar to the Manhattan Project, which, as you know, was compartmentalized and secret. So a majority of the people that are involved in these projects may not even really be aware, or they are aware at the upper levels, and they obviously they've signed some kind of non-disclosure agreement. They're bound to this agreement that they can't speak to what they're doing. But I absolutely believe that this is what they're doing. And if you look to like Malaysia's Air Force, they outfit their C-130s, which are the massive soup tankers, right? Our own U.S. Air Force uses the C-130s to disperse fire retardants, but also adulticides, which are highly toxic for wildlife, birds, bees, butterflies, and humans. And so, but if you look to, they have the massive canisters, they openly admit to doing it. I just simply believe our military has not notified the American public because they know that we would not stand for it. And so it's just a matter of time. And I've been also calling on our elected representatives to address this and to use their government accountability, and they within a matter of a few weeks, because even I've uncovered the NGOs, the universities, the billionaires, the players that are involved with the research right now. I've already been putting this out on my Substack. So I have names, places, dates, and addresses. I'm calling on Trump and Bobby to address this. It's very simple to just declare a moratorium on this immediately, and then let us sort through the details of what's been happening. Sorry, I cut you off there, but
Fantastic.
Yeah.
No. I really want to hear from you and the amazing research that you've done. I still hear when I have discussions with people, it's kind of like, talking to people about the whole COVID thing. And, have you really got up to speed that these things are super dangerous and they're a bioweapon and they've killed millions of people, and they're still like, in disbelief. And I have the same thing when I talk to some people about chemtrails, and they're all confused. And, well, is that really happening? It was another one of those conspiracy theory things, and it's just amazing to kind of look up there and see, and you'll understand almost everything by looking up in the sky. But Here's an example of one. I had to bring it in.
Yes.
Go ahead, Melissa, and play clip 3.
Yeah.
You know, it's so apropos with what's coming out of the back of that jet. You almost think the jet's on fire, right? It's got problems, serious problems. The reality is the guy forgot to turn off the chem sprayer nozzle or whatever. He's landing, pushing that stuff out. You know, it's like it's time to put to rest the whole concept, right? Of this is a conspiracy theory. This is reality. It's been happening a long time for a bunch of nefarious reasons, right?
Well, you know, you had Rosalind. I discovered later on, Rosalind Peterson was very outspoken about this. And then obviously Dane Wigington was very outspoken about this. There have been activists that have been talking about this and whistleblowers. And I only learned about it roughly 10 to 12 years ago and didn't really speak much about it because at that time you were so ostracized for even bringing it up. You were made fun of, you were mocked, you were called they tried to paint you as this crazy nut job. And after living through 2020 and standing up, I stood up against all the baloney EUA for, mass testing, all of that stuff. And it was after that, and I was, very outspoken. So I faced a lot of criticism. I was kicked out of grocery stores for refusing to wear a mask. I had dealt with enough controversy and conflict that I became fearless. And I decided I'm done not talking about this. It is time to put this on the table. It is time for people to feel comfortable speaking about this and their observations, because what I found in private conversations is that people were noticing. They just were too afraid to say anything. So I set out to change that mentality, because I reached this point where I was so beyond frustrated. And I thought, so I started a Telegram channel called California Chemtrails. And my thought was, I want everyone to start documenting, observing the skies, because what I saw was, they will spray. If you get up in the morning and you take the time to get away from your devices and you look at the sky, you watch the sunrise, take note of what the day looks like. And then if you have opportunities throughout the day, step outside and take another look, take in the sky, and it becomes undeniable finally. Because what I find is that they disperse the lines, right? And then by the 4 or 5 o'clock, the sky is gone. So if everyone who's in their office is too busy, they're on their computers, they're making phone calls, they're driving, they're not looking up. And by the time they come out, they just say, oh, it's overcast, or, oh, and so just getting people to start observing, it becomes undeniable. And then on top of that, I was finding evidence that, they've been doing it, sort of under wraps without anybody's real knowledge or consent for decades. And I thought, well, I'm going to focus on this because this is evidence in my hot little hands. And I had this long, written correspondence as evidence that I was building up. I wanted to document what they knew or didn't know. And what I found was a lot of incompetency. But yeah, I don't know where I was going with this, but it's real, it's here. And unfortunately, what I'm finding now, because awareness is starting to take root, people are starting to pay attention. I'm seeing it more and more on social media. It's more acceptable. People are posting their pictures, they're posting their videos, they're researching, they're thinking about this. And what I'm noticing is that now the next kind of infiltration is what my opinion is, what they're infiltrating with something. There's a lot of gaslighting, so much gaslighting happening right now. We're being told, nope, those are just ice crystals. It's just a supersaturated ice region. That's just jet farts. Okay. That is baloney. The same people that are promoting this as, oh, it's just jet fuel and all your, it's just a supersaturated ice region. That's just jet farts. Okay. That is baloney. The same people that are promoting this as, oh, it's just jet fuel and all you're seeing is just jet pollution are the same ones that also deny that HARP has any way to manipulate the ionosphere, or that NEXRAD towers, which are, by the way, managed by the U.S. Air Force, the National Weather Service, and the FAA, aren't somehow manipulating weather. And so what they're trying to do now, and this is throughout my research, I've been following the money. We can get into that some more, but I found very distinct patterns. It's driven by very, very wealthy billionaires, but then also they set up these NGOs that are all, the frontier climate, and they create new markets. They all fund each other, and then they use taxpayer dollars to build and research and experiment.
I've got a question for you, because
yes.
I was, following along as well. Earlier we talked about the layering pieces of this, because you're taking these people on at like the lower echelon where potentially, maybe the lower regions have some control over the skies at a certain altitude. But then we've got the FAA involved, right? And the FAA then controls the skies after a certain altitude, up to a certain altitude, and then who controls beyond that? Maybe NASA, right? At the end of the day, though, we have these layers of sky and these different jets and planes operating. What's been your research showing you on that?
So let me speak first to the state legislation that's been being discussed. Number one, I think it's really positive that we're finally acknowledging that geoengineering is happening, because I think for a very long time, nobody believed it. And so I feel very hopeful that we have legislators now thinking about this and talking about this. And now that said, they don't actually have the ability to prevent, I believe it was like 300 feet over the tallest building. That's the FAA's jurisdiction. So this will be a federal matter, and the federal projects are not very transparent. I am aware that the Department of Energy is involved in this. I am aware that the Department of the Interior is involved in this. They had something called Project Skywater. I mean, they've been manipulating weather for a very long time. So I think it's positive that states are starting to recognize this, but now at the end of the day, I think we're really going to have to put it on our, Trump and Bobby Kennedy to identify the players and to identify the universities and to demand that they stop their research. This is always couched under research. Again, on my Substack, it's the layers are so complex. When you follow the money, you see just this flow, and it's so many names and players and subsidiaries of corporations and NGOs that it becomes, it's your head will start to swim and spin. But I'm just one person, and I've been able to identify multiple players that are involved. And I know that with, they talk about DOGE, and they have the ability to dig into the exorbitant spending or the wasteful spending, and they can figure this out relatively quickly. Who are the agencies that are funding the research for solar radiation management? Who are the universities that are getting the funding from these billionaires and NGOs to experiment with solar radiation management, like Harvard, and you have the Department of Colorado, and then you have other agencies like Desert Research Institute. It goes on and on and on, and it's so convoluted and such a complex web of players that it will require everyone to become their own DOGE. I like to say it's such a massive issue, it's such a big thing, that it can become overwhelming, and we can just spin out over information and just we're only good for resharing information. What I'm trying to inspire people to do is to bring it down to the local level. What can you control in your own backyard, or how can you take steps to manage what happens in your space, your neighborhood, your county, your community? I've been engaging with my county supervisors. In fact, I ran to be on the local air pollution control district hearing board. Unfortunately, my application was turned in January, and my county supervisors cannot pull it together enough to agree or decide on who's going to serve on this hearing board, which they are legally required to have, according to the California Air and Resources Board requirements for air districts. So we are being failed by every elected representative. Our local media is pathetic. We must be our own media. I'm saying this all the time. I've reached out to my local media multiple times to expose what's happening. They couldn't give a damn. I've spoken to them on the phone. I've sent them information. They blow you off, and they blow you off. So it's going to take more than just the squeaky wheel, the one person who's like ringing the bell. You need more people applying pressure, because when more people apply pressure, it becomes harder and harder to ignore that squeaky wheel who's always at the board meeting shouting for 3 minutes. We have to get more people engaged and involved and standing up. And when I share my videos and my pictures of the way my skies look, people say, that is insane. I don't know why more people aren't angry about this. And I'm saying, yeah, me too. I mean, I'm a mother, and I drove to an airport because, damn it, I'm sick of this crap. And I don't know how else to make it stop. So at the very least, I wanted to go right to the person that was doing it and say, hey, hang on. I know what you're doing. Do you know what you're doing? I don't like that you're doing this. We're sick of this. And I put him essentially, that was sort of putting him on notice in a way, like, we're aware of you. Here, we have the data, and now you know. And now it's out there. That company That company needs to be called out. Jody Fisher is the director of operations for Weather Modification International. I have put his face and his phone number out there and his email for everyone to contact them. I've done the same for multiple other players. Dustin Moskowitz does a lot of funding for the global dimming, okay, another billionaire. And these billionaires tuck their money into their nonprofits to hide, it's a tax evasion scam is what I think. All these NGOs are just a way for the billionaires to tuck their money and invest in all the things that contribute to the control. Ultimately, this is what it's about. Poisoning, killing off the food, harming people, making them sick and dependent and unable to think critically or to act. This is about the great take. It's here. This is so much. This connects to all the other things that we're up against. It's not just the manufactured scamdemics. It's the manufactured fires and flooding. Because something else I've learned, and I've got great documentation here, is that they can actually induce drought by putting too much particulate in the atmosphere. And as Dane has probably discussed, you've probably heard that, they've forest fire as a military weapon. You've got the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration who admitted to seeding hurricanes 70 years ago. I even was tracking flights during the last, I think it was Hurricane Milton. I've got screenshots of everything. They had their Lockheed Orion in the middle of the storm circling around. And then they had like a Gulfstream 5 or 6 high up above 42,000 feet. Don't quote me there, but I've got images still, screenshots, circling above the storm. And when I presented this, you have these naysayers that said, oh, they're just taking measurements. Are they? I don't trust NOAA any further than I could throw them. They just asked for $6 billion of a discretionary budget. They're getting money. These agencies get a lot of money for discretionary spending, and it's time that stopped. I no longer trust these agencies that claim that they're just there to track and monitor and give us their friendly alerts, because there are patterns. I want to bring this up. During COVID, I can't even call it COVID. We were getting these blaring emergency alerts on our phones. Stay indoors. COVID's on the rise. Get your vaccine here. So 6-foot distance. I'm not kidding. I saved screenshots of every alert. I finally turned off my alerts, and then I turned them back on again. And we had in California this bizarre, we had this heavy stone hail. This is what actually got me to test my brain samples. We had this crazy weather, and then our phones started blowing up with these alerts saying, stay inside, tornado alert, go to the lowest floor in your house, don't get on the road, find shelter now. And I went, oh, this sounds a lot like the COVID alerts. And so I started documenting. And I realized this is like the bell, the alert bell that keeps you in this constant state of fear, alarm, alarm, be alarmed, be fearful, hide in your shelter, watch the news for updates, right? The Mockingbird media will tell you what's coming. And so it's a doozy. There's just so many layers to this.
So many things come to mind. First of all, the whole weather modification, yes, we use it for military. We use it in the Middle East. We can create a drought where we want to. We can make it rain, hailstorm, and they're driving that with multiple things. We're talking frequency. We're talking ground-based delivery. We're talking jet delivery. And we could just say other, all the way to maybe 5G. But at the end of the day, that's almost like the red herring piece. Mm-hmm. The reality is that, we're seeing other things happen, and other things are showing up, like what's with the crazy fog, and then the things that are falling from the sky, and then you can't burn the snow. And I mean, the list of weird things coming from this weather modification is crazy.
Well, speaking of the fog, I had my own experience in November of last year. I went outside early in the morning, and I could just feel this thickness in the air. And I had my spotlight because I'm outside checking on my chickens, and I'm outside doing stuff. And I could see in the beam, and I have videos of this. I'm not sure if I was able to send you a video, but I'll be happy to send it. I have it on my Substack as well. The fog, it was not fog. It was this swirling mass it was so surreal. And, I have more videos and pictures in my phone of the sky and the atmosphere and things that I'm observing than I do with my own family. But, what's wonderful about taking pictures and documenting is that it's a timestamp, because you never know if it might connect to something later on. Well, within a week, my son got very, very sick, as did other children. And that illness was, vomit, diarrhea, uncontrollable. And then it kind of progressed into this earache. And then it was the highest fever he ever had in his life. And by the end of it, my husband said, I think he might have had meningitis. And I never took him into the doctor. I learned to stay away from doctors after the hard way. We get, that's a whole other story. I mean, I learned not to trust them. I was very trusting. I got burned. I'm never going back. But we made it through. But then what's amazing is watching that this didn't just happen here. It was happening in other states, and it was happening in other parts of the world. So I thought, and you know, you think about Operation Sea Spray, where they released bacteria on, you know, an unknowing population, and they released bacteria in the New York subway. Apparently there are like hundreds of these previous experiments that they've done. So I would not put it past them. I think it's, you know, gloves off right now. They're coming hard. I think that this whole climate change, global warming scam is really just another way to keep us controlled, in fear, in line, measured, tracked, surveilled, monitored, harassed, more taxed, eminent domain. You know, we're going to dry out your land, and then we're going to flood out your land, and then we won't let you rebuild. We're going to, you know, all these heavy metals, how much do they contribute to the fires, right? I mean, fires are burning hotter and faster. There's likely directed energy involved with them, as you've probably seen. This is the great take. We are in a war. And what's appalling to me is that a majority of us don't seem to see it. And so I feel like I've been banging my head against the wall trying to connect the dots for people to say, this is all interconnected, you know, and you have to start just using your intuition and paying attention, because it's really, it's here and now. And we need to start finding our courage and our voices and getting up, because it's not going to be solved by maybe one or two people that are in so-called in charge. It's really going to require all of us to put in the elbow grease here. That's where I am at this point.
You know, when you say interconnected, I think it's a great statement, almost a segue, really, because so many of these things are connected back again to the money, you know, USAID and others. But, you know, when you say track and trace the money, you know, let's see, what was the last time we were able to balance the budget with the Pentagon? Oh, we can't do that? Oh, okay. And then, you know, we've gotten rid of records, right? And things have gone awry. And billions of dollars are missing. We just can't seem to like organize that, you know, and that's where Doge comes in, which has never really been done on this scale ever that I'm aware of. And then we've got the black projects, which the military is involved in, you know, the whistleblowers from the military talking about the huge amounts of these chemicals that are being assigned to these bases, where these jets are then leaving under military N numbers or non-numbers, okay, to do what they're doing, clandestine spraying or whatever, you know? So, I mean, it's not like it's just like an NGO necessarily running the program, but when your military is up to its neck in it, trying to fire anybody that speaks out, you know, like you say, it's a much bigger problem than people know.
People on the inside are probably afraid. I'm aware that, you know, they've signed these agreements. They don't want to be thrown into jail, because it's, you know, so it's pretty heavy penalties if they do come out. I'm just hoping that they can be inspired to come together. I mean, it's time. I don't know how you can live with yourself knowing that you're part of these programs that are actually causing the death and destruction of life as we know it. And what aggravates me is that, as you're aware, this CRISPR engineering of everything is happening, right? So they're killing off the natural plants. They're killing off insects, but they've got their CRISPR replacements, right? And they don't care if they wipe out nature, because they just want to genetically modify everything. And you're finding this now, they're genetically modifying seeds. You've got different companies out here that talk about global sustainability and feeding the countries, and we're going to modify our seeds, and they call it, they have fancy names and euphemisms for what they're doing. At the end of the day, they are gene editing our foods. They are gene editing insects. And it's always under the guise of, it's for global resilience. It's for sustainability. It's for the health of everybody, and to solve the hunger problems and diversity and inclusivity. It's all the same garbage. And I used to fall for that many years ago, because I didn't have the time to do the deep dives. And I'm very grateful that after having my child and learning the hard way that the pharmaceutical industry was not exactly what I thought it was. I caused harm to my child unknowingly because I trusted the system. And that was my first lesson. Then I learned about the revolving doors between the EPA and Monsanto, right? Bayer, revolving doors. It all comes down to money. And these people that are supposed to represent, you know, the agencies that are here to protect us and look out for us are failing. They're fraudsters. They're psychopaths. They're greedy. They've lost their souls. They've taken the blood money. So it's really on all of us to be informed about what we're putting into our mouths. You know, the system is corrupt and broken. I think right now, I've said this before, FDA, CDC, EPA need to be leveled, absolutely leveled, cut apart and done. I have no respect for the system anymore. That is why I've been working very hard to get away from it in the ways that I can, to get away from their towers, their surveillance cameras, that network, the Palantir network, you know, the all-seeing evil eye everywhere. I want to grow my own food. I'm supporting local farmers. I hope everybody out there understands the importance of buying your meats or your raw milks. You know, they should be packaged as not for sale. Keep the government and the regulatory USDA agencies out of your business. We've got to get back to that. That's the only way I think we're going to make it through this, because I can't provide all the food that my family needs to thrive and survive. So everyone needs to figure out what they can grow, what they can nurture in their own backyard or in their home, what skills they can bring to the table. This is one solution that I'm, you know, trying to encourage people to start thinking about. You've got to strengthen your communities now, because I don't know when or if this is really going to be resolved with the current representatives that we have. I ultimately believe finally that they are controlled as well, that this is probably beyond what they can do. So I don't want to be the dasher of hope, but I feel like we have to be preparing and, you know, securing our neighborhoods and communities, and continue to apply pressure to the elected representatives and hope for something to happen there, but don't wait for anyone. We can no longer afford to wait for anyone.
You know, I think that people need to be aware of the talking point word salad, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where the system continues to put out these talking points, and they're typically the absolute opposite of what they're doing. Okay,
Inversion.
Completely inverted, so that the sheeple will follow these talking points. Reality is that it's nothing more than that. You know, you mentioned the food supply. That's a critical piece of, I think, our discussion, because our food supply is being impacted in ways people have no idea. You know, what did China see with all of the impact of their poisoning as they lost their ability and their insects and bees to pollinate, right? That's what happened in China. And so they have to like manually pollinate. Well, here, aren't we down with our bee population? I've listened to different beekeepers, and we're down, what, 80% of our ability to produce and pollinate. And people, I don't think, really understand the gravity of what that means, because the entire food ecosystem is hugely impacted, right?
Absolutely. It's actually so sad, you know, when I have my moments where I sit and think about really what's happening. I mean, it's never too late. You know, I've had some people say it's too late, and I'm like, it's never too late. I'm going to keep fighting to expose what I can while I can. But no, you're right. I've spoken to beekeepers. It is a struggle. And I you know, never been a better time to start a backyard beekeeping, you know, like learn how to take care of bees. We all need to be sort of contributing to this die-off. And bees are dying for a multitude of reasons. All the adulticides they're spraying on us, they're fogging neighborhoods, they're using drones and aircraft to spray communities. I've shared this before with what they've been spraying over bird sanctuaries. They spray the adulticides over these ecological reserves and these sanctuaries. And I mean, that's what led to my first pilot confrontation, is that I couldn't take that anymore. I just thought, how dare you fly over these protected areas, these waterways, with your poisons? I mean, I'm at the point where I don't know what else to do. I have to go out and confront. That's what I can do. And I have to expose. That's what I can do. And I'm doing all that I can to at least expose it. And I would love to do a lot more, but I have a child and I can't afford me to be put into prison. You know, I mean, I want more people to get engaged. This is really, really important. This is a war. Again, this is a war. And sometimes I look around and I think, where are the men? Where are our men? Well, they've been demasculinized. We've just killed masculinity, right? Not all men, I'm sorry, Dr. Bill, but where are the men? Because women are raising their children, and we need some men to get up and stand up. And, you know, there's so much to be fighting right now.
Yeah. You know, you can go back and, I mean, there's a lot to discuss there. I mean, you can look at the soy into the you know, the food for babies, and how that completely alters their chemistry when they need testosterone and mother's milk, not soy product. But that's another subject. You know, to give you a piece of personal information, years ago, I was diagnosed with lymphoma, and they asked me a very interesting question. They said, were you ever around pesticides? Yeah. What was interesting is my family, residence was right next to one of the big fields where they grew the crops. And the crop dusters would come rolling through there. I mean, you could literally, wave to the guy and he would smile and wave at you, and you could and they would blast that field with the spray, and it would waft and drift right over on top of you. And as kids, we didn't know or care, whatever, But the reality was they were right. As a kid, I got dusted on a regular basis with pesticides.
Yeah.
And later they said, well, that's probably why you got lymphoma.
Yes.
Because you had so much exposure, right?
Yes.
Nowadays, they probably have a class action suit. But, that's how far back it goes. And I won't say how old I am, but it goes back a long time.
Well, my own father was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and guess what he sprayed for like decades and decades? Roundup from the 90s. We found receipts from the 90s. And we had a quarter-mile long gravel driveway. And of course, you don't want weeds to come up through the gravel. So he was always out there spraying the gravel driveway up to the barn. And we had a 10-acre property. So he was always out spraying. Yeah. And that was part of my awakening too, was again, that revolving door. They had, Monsanto had ghostwriters, saying that glyphosate was safe. So that they're all liars. They're all incompetent liars and compromised. So we have to be our own health advocates. Sorry, I cut you off again, but I mean, there's so much to say.
No, I mean, we're literally in the battle and the survival for our lives and our children's lives and humanity as we know it. Another thing that's, interesting is the lockstep by which this spraying operation is going on around the world. Yeah. And, the only thing that I mentioned this on the prior show, the only thing that I can see that has global participation on that level would be what's happening in Antarctica, and has been for a long, long time, which is, we're not allowed to go there, and it's under like military, protection. And I mean, you kind of go, we're all humans. Why, are you doing that? And then, the other thing would be, why is there such global cooperation or seemingly cooperation? Because you see in the videos that people are posting and the social media that's out there, is they're from all over the world. They're from every kind of dialect and language. And they're just going, what is going on? Right.
Yes.
So there's a lot more cooperation. And then the other thing is, when you get up to a certain level, do the countries really have control over that airspace at, 45,000 feet, or do they lose it and something else has got it?
Yes. Interestingly, a couple things there. Apparently, so there's a gentleman right now. Now, there are all different types of ways to take action. Okay. Some people like to write letters or make phone calls or go to board meetings. And there are other people that like to confront pilots. And there are others that like to go and do simulations. There is a gentleman, I forget it, it's Michael Lewis, Arthur Meyer, something like that. Don't quote me, but he goes by Lewis. And he's out there right now pointing out the NexRad towers. And he's trying to get all of the local enforcement to address this. He's saying these are directed energy weapons that our military is using against us. I want you to come out here. This is an emergency. You need to shut these off. And he's bringing exposure to it. He's doing these simulations. He's walking around with his backpack. This man is a very interesting man, passionate from the heart. If you go to Veterans on Patrol, you can watch it. He's been doing live simulations, walking around, just spreading awareness. And this is what I love what he's doing, because we need to bring attention to this. Most people that walked by had no idea that these massive balls were these radar, bulbs, and you see them everywhere. And I've not dived into NexRad as much as I could, but I definitely, when you know that the U.S. Air Force is involved and you're watching these things light up, there are people that track these, and they see the weather change, and people are finally paying attention.
We're going to come back and we're going to revisit this as we continue on, but I wanted to get your kind of parting comments in terms of, taking action, at a grassroots, and you're mentioning that. I mean, the guy, I think he's got a monitor and he's showing things or whatever. Yeah. We can take action at a local level to bring awareness, and maybe that can work its way up, but we've got to somehow get to our legislators. Yes. And the people with more clout, and, the new Kennedy regime out there, taking on the behemoth, as people kind of perceive it. Yes. I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of what we can do? I mean, we've got to start reaching out, right, to our.
Yep, we sure do. Well, and it will always have, if anything, what comes from engaging with your legislators is that they become better informed. Now, I've had I used to try to help with legislation with regard to the, vaccine bills that were coming out for children and the different bills like that in California. That became sort of, I left that because it was incredibly frustrating. So maybe that's not my wheelhouse, but it's really great for people that are passionate. That's one way they can educate their legislators, work on helping them get some addendums put into bills or creating new bills. That does wonders for getting people better educated. Personally, there's just so many lobbyists that get in the way. There are hydrologists and lobbyists that come in and they really intimidate the legislators, is what I'm finding. I have friends in Idaho that have been working on legislation, and they've spent months and months going over meeting after meeting after meeting, only to have the representative drop it completely or just kind of say, I bow out of this, And so, but it doesn't mean don't stop trying. I think that's an important component of this awakening. You have to get your elected representatives informed about what's happening. I'm personally I've gotten to the place where I'm just done waiting. And I'm tired of waiting. Of course, do your due diligence, put the word out there, but I'm going to continue confronting anyone who's causing harm over my head. That's what I can do, and I have to do that. I have to give them notice. I have to let them know. And my thing is, I want to expose who they are. I want to show their faces. I want to give you their titles. I want you to know who they are so that they don't think they can hide anymore behind their company logo, or they work for this department. No, I'm going to start showing your faces. I want your faces out there for everyone to see. You have been now told that we know what you're doing, and that's my approach. Probably more aggressive than some would like, but that's the way I feel like there's all sorts of angles that will work. Just get engaged more than simply resharing with your groups on Telegram or Signal or Facebook that you already know. You have to reach the people that don't understand yet. You have to start planting those seeds. I have slogan shirts and bumper stickers peppering the back of my car. I am planting seeds everywhere I go. I have so many conversations with strangers in grocery stores. The stickers on my car strike up, conversations in the parking lot. I am always out there and ready to plant a seed. And you may not convince somebody right away. And I talk to strangers too. I'll just plant a seed and move on. In fact, the other day there was a man that was getting a vaccine. I heard that somebody announced vaccine needed it, and I sidled up to him and I said, are you getting the vaccine? He said, yeah. I said, oh, walk away, get the package insert. Don't do it. Make an excuse, come back. And he's like, huh? And I just said, they're all harmful. And then I gave him my phone number and said, you can call me if you have any questions, but try to get out of this. I don't care anymore. I have nothing to lose. And if I can plant the seed for someone just to make them stop and think for a moment about what's happening, that's what I do.
Maybe you can find a package insert now that has something on it before you could.
Oh, I printed them all out. I handed my son over for everything, caused a lot of harm and issues and a lot of stress for my family for years until I finally stopped. And we've had to do various forms of, really healthful eating. You'd call it detox, but not formal detox. I can only, work to repair the damage that was caused. And I will never be silent now, because if I can help someone take a moment to stop and think before they cause harm to themselves or somebody else, fantastic. I don't care what anyone thinks about me anymore. I'm just going to tell you what I've discovered and where I'm coming from is a place of love. I want to prevent harm. And unfortunately, it takes getting harmed before most people wake up. That's the unfortunate thing, is that it's going to have to come to your front door and impact you in a way that's negative before people go, oh, what's going on here?
Kathryn, you also highlight, the conflicts of interest from a legislative standpoint continue to be out of control. And this also brings to bear those conflicts, because when, people can accept money from, these NGOs and others for a result, that means that we lose every time. We lose every time. They get what they want because they're paying people off, paying graft, whatever. And that's got to stop. But I want to bring Melissa on for some Q&A.
Great.
And segue over to that briefly here.
Yes. And there's the problem, reaction, solution. Unfortunately, now they're pushing cloud seeding because they've induced drought, right, with a lot of their programs. And so now they're like, well, so they create the problem, and then they say, well, we've got a solution. We can make it rain. We can make it snow. It's going to benefit the farmers. It's going to benefit. And that's what's so sickening for me, is that they have created the conditions that will then get us to demand their solutions. Yeah. That needs to end too. That's what I try to expose. I've been making videos for 5 years now as I've researched along this journey, various topics. I have multiple interests that I won't get into anymore to keep for the sake of time, but from the genetic modification of insects and animals to the adulticide spraying and the carbon capture scams and the money flow and who's paying what. It's all on my BitChute and Substack. Okay, go ahead, Melissa.
Yeah, so just a couple things I kind of wanted to touch on before asking my questions is, you said you went there because you wanted to know if these were humans or not. Do they realize what they're doing? Do they realize the orders that they're carrying out are unethical, things like that? And people just assume everyone's a monster that's involved. I worked at Pfizer for 10 years. I can tell you 98% of those people don't realize what they're doing.
Right.
It's those few that are at the top that know, and those flight people, the pilots you talk to, probably think they're doing something good. So then they're going to be combative with you like they did when all I hear is, we're just following orders to poison you. How they got combative and everything. But not everybody involved is intentionally doing something that they know is wrong.
I agree. And I want to say this too. When I sometimes curse at the military, I want to say my husband was former military. So I know that not every person that signs up to serve is a terrible person. They do it with the goodness in their heart. They care about this country. They love and want to protect it. But I will say we should make sure that we're clear that there are people in positions at the top who have the power with the trickle down effect. They are the ones who impose what they want these underlings to do for them. And a lot of people are just oblivious, collecting a paycheck, and they've not. Yes. Same thing that I found at the regulatory agency. A lot of the very nice people I was conversing with, but they were absolutely clueless. And they were more focused on net zero carbon capture baloney than they were on the fact that I had aluminum, titanium, all these metals in my rain samples, and they're responsible for the air quality, but yet they don't test for any of these metals. Because they're so focused on carbon capture. It's just so
that they can say there is no evidence to support that these metals are being fake. That's what they say. That's how they, cover their tracks.
Yes.
I live in Kansas, and it's illegal to collect rainwater over a certain amount.
Do it anyway.
I'm sure that they let you do the little, where you put the little tubes out on your fence that measure how much is raining. That's it. But
they've caused so much harm with their policies. They didn't care about the fact that under an EUA you have a right to refuse, right? They still force that stuff on everybody. I have no respect. I'm just going to say this, no respect for their rules or their laws anymore. I think you should do whatever the F you want on your property, if I may say, because screw them. You can collect rainwater. They are diverting water based on who can pay to divert that water.
Well, I used to think it was because they wanted to charge you to use water. Now I almost wonder if it's so that you can't test what the water quality is.
Either one could. It doesn't. I say capture that water, and
that's
where
sky.
I am.
You're going to control it. It's falling from the sky.
Yes.
When I first bought my house, I bought it from someone that lived in this house for 40, 50 years, and they were gardeners, and they had rain collectors all over. And when I was new and I didn't know that, I called the cops because I thought somebody was trying to break in, and the cops were doing a sweep around my house, and they go, you got rain collectors out here?
Are you
kidding? I'm like, I go, is that what they are? I mean, I don't know. I literally have never gardened before. I was like, I just moved in like 6 months ago and they've just been in the yard. He goes, well, you need to remove them. They're illegal to own. And I'm like, okay, you're here to try to protect me and you care that I have rain collectors in my yard.
And now you know to get their name and badge number and document everything.
Yep.
Yeah, well, that leads me kind of to my question, is what method of test are you using for the rainwater so that maybe other people who are interested in testing their rainwater can go out and do the same test?
Well, it's going to be different in every state. So in California, there's a lab. It's a CLIA certified lab. I forget what that stands for, but it was called McCampbell Analytical Inc. Now, by the way, again, I'm going to share the link with you on my Substack. I have my first Zoom, I've got a tutorial. I talk about how I track the skies, look at weather modification reports, and even how to test samples. And I also have a written instructions. If you look for in all my posts, written instructions on, and I talk about all the things that I've done, the metals I tested for. And by the way, I don't even know if I'm testing for all the potential things that could be in my rain. I was inspired again by what Dane was doing in Shasta County. I decided, well, I want to know what's in Tuolumne County. And so I started doing it. So what I would recommend is people contact a lab near them. And if they'll put you in touch with a sales rep and you can just say, I would like to test some water for heavy metals. What are the metal tests that you offer? Right? You don't need to give them a rant. Just say, I'd like to test some water. Now, interestingly, when I turned mine in, they called it wastewater. So my rain samples were tested as wastewater. And I selected the metals that I wanted to test for because they offered me, they called it a CAM 17 test. And that had an assortment of metals. But then I was aware that, Dane said there was aluminum, so I'm going to add aluminum to this, and then I'm going to add this and this and this. And then I learned finally to whittle it down, because after I think the first 6 or 7 tests, there were certain metals that just weren't showing up consistently. So I decided to eliminate those, and that got my costs down quite a bit. But yeah, if you talk to a sales rep, they'll tell you what you need to do. For me, for this lab, some other labs have different requirements. For this lab, all I needed was 50 milliliters of the wastewater, the rainwater. And so what I did was you collect in clean plastic containers. You don't want to collect, like if you're testing for plastic contamination, you don't collect in plastic. That's why you have to speak to somebody at the lab to make sure you're collecting in the appropriate way. So I put out clean plastic containers, and I was obsessive compulsive. And so I would set it out before I thought it was going to rain, and I covered some surface space with lids and containers, and it would rain for 5 to 10 minutes. And I had just enough. That 50 milliliters is roughly a quarter cup of rain, and I consolidated and I sent in my samples. And then finally they ended up sending me bottles from the lab that I could just put the samples into, and then it had all of I could label it, and they have it pre-labeled for me, and then I just put the date and time of the sample. So anyway, you would speak to the lab sales team, and they'll tell you what the cost is and what you can test for. They'll show you your options.
Do you have another question, Melissa?
Yes. So I noticed in the video clip was you could hear your planes. So I personally think I see specific planes spraying sometimes, but I could never hear them. They're up way too high, at least in my opinion. So how are you able to hear your planes? Are they flying extra low, or
so the
what?
cloud seeders are flying just above sort of this. They're about 10 to 15,000 feet. So these are the cloud seeding aircraft. Now, here's the thing. People think that cloud seeding, again, is just silver iodide. It's not, okay? It's loads of aluminum. And then also, as I told you, and I'll be doing a video on this at some point, proprietary ingredients. They don't even want the people to know what's in these flares anymore. So the cloud seeders typically fly at lower altitudes. Now, the planes that you're seeing likely, because by the way, I've learned that I've been on flight radar tracking aircraft for over 5 years now. And I'm very savvy at identifying military, commercial, private. I can look up the registration numbers for each aircraft. Well, a lot of the aircraft you'll find, if you get oriented with where you are on a map and you're on flight radar, a lot of them do not have their transponders on. So that leads me to believe that these are definitely covert operations, and it's likely military.
Okay, interesting. Because I just assume, because they're so high up, I can't really tell what kind of planes they are. I assume they're just regular.
Get on flight. I do the tutorials on how to identify aircraft. Start small. Start with just where you live, right? Find yourself on a map, because all the time there are planes scattered across the map. It's like millions and millions of, or that hundreds of thousands of flights, whatever it is, okay, per day. So it'll be overwhelming when you see the United States or the global map. Zoom into your state, zoom into your county, find your general location, and then the tutorial will be very helpful, and all of it's free. I use flightradar24.com, and it's free. I use it on my browser because the browser is easier to navigate. And then you can start to tap on the aircraft. And I go through, again, it's written instruction and video instruction. And I will be hosting more of those for people that have questions that have been trying it. And you'll learn to identify who the aircraft belongs to. And that's when you start getting familiar with patterns. Like, okay, this is over my house, and just start documenting.
Excellent resource, because people just like where do I go to test my water? Just a process and procedure that you've used, which is not complicated. And, you can track somebody down. They don't need to know that you're, some conspiracy theorist.
No, and you can just say, I'd like to test some rainwater, Yeah, that's
there
it.
You go.
Keep it simple.
Yeah. Yep. So we're reaching the end of our time frame on the show. Did you have anything else, Melissa?
I mean, just other than, we know that our food industry supplements, quote unquote, our food with iron and heavy metals, is what they tell us anyway. How are they going to frame it up that it's good that they're spraying the metals? Do you have any idea or theory?
Are they going to frame it up that it's good? Well, I think they just try to make it sound like it's silver and it's benign. So when you understand aluminum, how it's a neurotoxin, and when you breathe it in at, in the nanoscale, it's more bioavailable when you inhale it. So there's just no excuse for things like aluminum.
Yeah, and it passes all the blood-brain
Well, and
barriers.
also the Blue
You know,
Cross
and
Blue
I-
Shield did mention in 2020 that early onset dementia and Alzheimer's are on the rise in 30 and 40-year-olds. So it's not getting better, it's getting worse. And it's time to expose them and hold them accountable. If you live in Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, California, Idaho, these are all, they've had ongoing seeding projects for a long time. So I've tried to focus on what I can manage and control. But then my research has shown me that this is just so far beyond this little project over my head. This is just one of many things I'm trying to tackle to make it manageable. But all hands on deck.
And the list of metals and other, I mean, aluminum compounds, aluminum oxide, aluminum hydroxide, barium compounds, and barium sulfates, strontium compounds, strontium nitrates, titanium dioxide, sulfur compounds, sulfur dioxide, polymer fibers. I'm just
Titanium
getting started.
dioxide nanoparticles is another one to look into. They're using that openly in the United Arab Emirates, and then they're experimenting with it here in the United States. The documents I received that are where they say it's proprietary is going to be a real problem because we have never given our consent for them to douse us with proprietary ingredients. That's bogus. So that I have a lot of work that I'm still, it takes time to go through. You know, as I'm going through the proprietary list, I'm looking at the limits they've set for some of these OSHA limits and inhalation limits, and I'm trying to figure out what that might correspond to in their lists of toxic substances and metals. So much work to do.
Well, when you go all the way to the top of the mountains, all the way to probably Everest, where they've tested, and the limits are thousands of % above where normal is considered, you know, you can begin to get an impression about how bad it is. They don't want us to know how bad it is because of all the reasons behind the scenes. But it's been a great show today. We could come back, I think, and add to the show and start talking about the physical attributes, passing the blood-brain barrier, the things that actually get into you and are not supposed to be in you, and what are the physiological components, neurological disorders, and the list goes on. But we've really kind of opened the door further in our part 2 series. Great view into, you know, your world and what you've been able to accomplish and expose. And I look forward to a follow-up show as we continue to talk about toxic skies.
Thank you, Dr. Gill, so much for having this conversation and putting it out there for everyone. And thank you, Melissa, as well, for your whistleblowing and your activism. It's just every bit counts. It's a pleasure to meet you both.
Thank you.
It's great to have you on the show, Kathryn.
Thank you.
Take care.